Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. It is Thursday, May 21st, 2015, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Well, we're going to get right into the news tonight. Want to talk about Rand Paul's filibuster. Well, it wasn't technically a filibuster. It ended right before midnight, and the reauthorization of the Patriot Act wasn't actually up for a vote. However, he did commandeer the Senate for about 10 hours, reminding us that the Patriot Act can scoop up a lot more than just our metadata. Now, he made some very good points there as he stalled the debate on reauthorization of the Patriot Act. One, the NSA can use the Patriot Act to collect in bulk a lot more than just phone records. Now, the controversy is over Section 215 of the Patriot Act, which is what the NSA uses to collect massive amounts of phone metadata. But Democrat Ron Wyden also joined Senator Paul, and he wanted to remind everyone that the NSA can basically use Section 215 to turn all of our phones into tracking devices 24 hours a day. And he also strongly suggested that the agency would be able to collect in bulk millions of innocent Americans' credit card records, medical records, financial and bank records, gun records, and they're going to use Section 215 to do all of that as well. Now, he also pointed out that the USA Freedom Act doesn't cover everything. Now, the USA Freedom Act is legislation that was passed by the House just last week, and it would replace bulk collection with a system that would search the data held by telephone companies on a case-by-case basis. Now, Paul kept bringing up the FISA Amendments Act, which allows officials to collect material including search history, the content of emails, file transfers, and live chats. And the NSA also abuses this same law to scan large portions of emails coming in and out of the U.S. And the USA Freedom Act also doesn't touch Executive Order 12333, which governs how the NSA can collect supposedly purely overseas communication. Now, he also said NSA surveillance is used for a lot more than just terrorism cases. We've pointed this out plenty of times. There's a little-cited technique known as parallel construction, where the Drug Enforcement Administration is getting wiretaps from the NSA and then hands over that information to local cops. And we already know all about the fusion centers that are all over the country. Paul also points out how using the Patriot Act for mass surveillance is illegal, no matter what Congress does. Just 2 weeks ago, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that it was illegal for the NSA to use the law to conduct mass surveillance at all. So Paul kept bringing up the fact, why is Congress even considering renewing an authority for a program that would be illegal for the NSA to continue anyway? Absolutely absurd. And then lastly, he said that there are plenty of other civil liberties concerns that Congress has yet to deal with. Obviously, there's a number of other controversial practices. One is known as sneak and peek warrants. These are court orders that allow law enforcement officers to essentially break into suspects' homes without their knowledge. These were sold as being needed for terrorism, but they were used in more than 99% of the time in drug cases. And also, there is the little tool being used by law enforcement, civil asset forfeiture.
Mr. Ashcroft, would you mind answering one question? I'm from a local journalist about citizen asset forfeiture. Do you think it's fair about the civil asset forfeiture for people to have their assets taken away without being found guilty?
Well, it depends on what the charge is.
Well, what if they haven't been put to trial or anything? Do you think it's fair that hard-earned money, not put to trial in any way, shape, or form yet, be taken by law authorities?
I think you have to look at the Constitution to figure that out.
Okay, there are several states that just refused to repeal.
That's a public policy decision they've made. And they're entitled to make it. And so each state has the ability to do that, and that's one of the reasons that we have a federal system.
That's true. And where in the Constitution does it give the authority for police to take people's hard-earned money without a trial?
Well, you'd have to go to the variety of cases that have ruled on it.
White House science czar John P. Holdren, who wrote the eugenics classic, Ecoscience, Population, Resources, Environment, with Paul and Ann Ehrlich, a population control manifesto that insists that illegitimate babies either be put up for adoption or aborted, adding sterilants to public drinking water and staple foods, restricting the number of children you can have, and ultimately creating a central planetary regime to control all population, resources, and the environment.
Now, the heart of his outlook is what he calls, he says that population is the root of all human problems. In other words, people pollute. Humanity is a cancer on the face of the earth. The one big problem in the ecosystem is the role of humankind. And of course, in reality, the existing ecosystem could not survive without the constant contributions of human production. Holdren says that the optimum world population is 1 billion. Now let's pause. At the time Holdren wrote that, the world population was already 4 billion. Today, if you say the optimum population is 1 billion, it would mean that more than 5 billion would have to go. And again, these are orders of magnitude that Hitler, Stalin, and Mao never dreamed of. Only in the mind of fanatics like Holdren do we get genocide of these proportions.
Now Holdren is using the old globalist tool, order out of chaos, citing the new statistics that 40% of U.S. bee colonies have collapsed over the past year. Holdren and the Obama administration are calling for restoring 7 million acres of bee habitat in the next 5 years. Before the feds start snatching up land and forcing people off of it, while buddying up to CropLife America, the group that represents the makers of pesticides, what are those that spend every day with bees saying? INFOWARS spoke with Texas-based Round Rock honey owner Conrad Buffard in his element.
I was teaching at a public high school full-time, raising a family, and starting this company and running one other company all at the same time, working all the time. And I did not have time to take my bees out to California or to, become a commercial pollinator. Well, it turns out that I got a lot of criticism from more established beekeepers because of that. Ended up showing that I was actually doing things right because most of those guys, they've come around to doing things the way I do them, which is small numbers of hives set out on big pieces of land. Because of the drought cycle, you have to be able to put 6 to 12 hives per acre and be okay with that. And so you have to have a lot of bee sites. We have to be able to spread our stuff out, spread our bees out so that they can get proper levels of nutrition. And so colony collapse disorder, the key issue is the way that we've always done things as an industrialized food society. Our food is grown on, in fields where it's just a large monocrop. You put bees out there and they only get one single source of nutrition, one single source of pollen, and they end up starving to death. Recently, with this federal task force to help the bees, I think that they're generally, they have, I guess, good intentions, if you will. However, from what I read, they were just wanting to plant a few flowers by the side of the road and at federal housing projects and things like that. And that's not even going to be a Band-Aid. That's nothing, really. There are certain types of pesticides that are widely available in the United States that, have a sublethal effect on bees. And especially, I've heard so many times from so many farmers that GMO corn and corn pre-treated with certain pesticides, that the bees will die off in the beginning. Like if we were to set this in front of a cornfield that was just coming up, the bees, about half the hive, 3/4 of the hive would die off right away, and then the remainder would come back. But the thing is that they've lost their momentum. So the next year comes around, they die off again, they've lost their momentum again. So they're on a downward spiral. There's also new pests and new challenges for bees. Just like humans can be susceptible to certain viruses and things like that, so can bees. And new ones are being introduced. It seems, every year there's something new. New mites, new this, new that. and those also have a big impact on bees. Sometimes even the cures for those things, or what we're told are the cures for those things, can be even more deadly for the bees. I have seen underneath a scanning electron microscope perfectly square pollen grains, and that doesn't happen in nature. Well, speaking with the gentleman that was showing me that, who's very well respected, nationally and internationally respected and acclaimed scientist on pollen here in Texas, he said that was GMO corn out of Kansas. And it's perfectly square. I mean, no wonder it's going to cause problems, because it can't move through the tissues as well as, say, a natural pollen could. And of course it's going to cause problems. So that's why we put our hives out here in these natural habitats where there's no cropland within 4 miles of here. And if there is, it's the bees aren't foraging on it. And the only way we know that they're not foraging on it is because we do pollen tests with Texas A&M that tell us exactly what's in the honey. Right now, I can tell you that the general mix of our honey is persimmon. That's a big one. We also have a lot of acacia and a small amount of mesquite trees. So we're seeing mainly acacia, guajillo, those sorts of acacia, and a little bit of some other trees, but we're seeing a typical Texas profile. In other words, plants that there would be no way could be made into GMO seed, or could be made from GMO seed. They're natural plants, and if you take other honeys, especially some from the Midwest and other areas where there's a lot of commercial planting, you'll find large amounts. If you find any pollen at all, you'll find large amounts of GMO pollens.
Obama signed H.R. 993. It was a bill funding the federal government, and there was a rider in it, a Monsanto and biotech rider. The gist of the rider is a dangerous, ghoulish GMO food crop can't be stopped by a court order. That crop can still be grown, harvested, and sold in the U.S. There are many reasons given to the decline in bees, but one argument that matters most is the use of genetically modified organisms and terminator seeds, genetically produced and distributed by powerful multinational lobbies that manipulate government and agricultural policy to encompass their agenda of dominance in the agricultural industry. American conglomerates such as Monsanto, Pioneer Seeds, and others have created seeds that do not reproduce. Logic states that if the flower pollen is sterile, bees are potentially going malnourished and dying of illness due to the lack of nutrients and the interruption of the digestive capacity of what they feed on through the summer and over the winter hibernation process.
So, if people want to make a change, grow their own plants from seed, grow them in soil that they've mixed themselves, that is clean, and don't use things like Roundup.
John Bound for INFOWARS.com.
Well, if you are an Alex Jones radio show viewer, then you know we've had a pretty sensational day here at InfoWars. Joining me in studio now, Rob Dew and Jakari Jackson. Now, we wanted to put together a Black Lives Matter protest, go out, educate the people, let them know that the race war starts in the womb, educate people on who Margaret Sanger is. And, Jakari, talk to me a little bit about what the intention was for this.
Well, we all know about the Black Lives Matter movement, the hashtag. And, our thought was, why not expand it beyond just police brutality? Because, yes, we know that is very much an issue, but it also affects people in a very positive or in a very profound way when it comes to abortion. The blacks are aborted at a huge rate in this country. We all know that it wasn't too long ago in New York, they actually aborted more children, black children, than were born. Right. So with this in mind, let's go out here and address this and talk to the people. And by and large, it worked out pretty well. Mm-hmm. We did have some communist agitators who showed up with their black tarp. If you can hand me that tarp.
Yeah. Well, commie scumbags
so,
showed up.
we had a very peaceful demonstration, and then they came with this. I'm not exactly sure what this is or where they got it.
It's a roofing material.
Okay, roofing material. So they came out with this and tried to cover people's signs. And I tried to talk to one of the guys out there, one of the communist guys.
This is communist cloak material.
Yeah, maybe that's what they make their cloaks out of.
Cloak of secrecy.
But I was trying to talk to one of the communist guys, and he said, "You're being aggressive. You're being, intimidating."
Asking him a question.
Yeah, just asking him a question. I was like, "Okay, whatever. I'll go talk to somebody else." And before I could spin to turn around, he and his friend go up to somebody else with a sign and start like
Yeah.
shoving them like this,
Yeah, they're-
trying to cover their son. I'm like,
Mind you, we didn't realize at the time who these people were. They were just showing up, and they were so angry.
Yeah, they were
like,
silent.
INFOWARS is anti-woman and anti-black people, and they were like shaking and crying because they were just seething with anger. And then turns out CJ actually recognized one of them from an event or something, and he said, "Hey, aren't those the kids that were